accept and maintain it. May I unfold the meaning of the Tathagata's truth. Okay, so this is the second part of yesterday's talk. We're talking about the transmission of light, and this is the enlightenment of the Buddha. So, this is a retreat commemorating the enlightenment of the Buddha. So I wanted to look at, what does this mean? What is this? What is enlightenment? What is it about? What does it mean? What are the qualities? What are the characteristics of it? How does it happen? So this gives the impression, if you look at the stories, there's 53 of them in here. If you look at the stories, it gives you the impression that something was transmitted from one teacher to the next teacher down an unbroken chain, an unbroken line. Buddha passed it on to Mahakashapa, who passed it on to Ananda, and so on. And each teacher is like the teacher passed it on to the student. But actually, that's not the case. That's not what's happening here. It seems like, enlightenment is something that you can give to somebody else. Or, you have to be a teacher to have it, and then you have to, as a student, if you want to get it, then you have to be a student of that teacher, and then you get it. But that's not what the message of the Denkoroku is not that. It's not that you're unenlightened and you have to go get enlightenment from a teacher. That would be really, so that's one point we have to be careful about. Here's a quote from a Chinese Zen master, Fa Yan. He says, "When the founder of Zen came from India to China," so he's talking about Bodhidharma, "it was not because there was something to transmit. He just pointed directly to people's minds so they could see their essence and realize enlightenment. How could there be any sectarian styles to value?" Yeah, he just pointed directly to people's minds. He's just we say in Zen, the finger pointing at the moon is not the moon. And don't mistake the finger for the moon. So we have to always continually be on guard for doing that. We mistake the finger. We can have very attractive fingers and think, this is it. Oh, it's that finger. But it's what the finger is pointing to. I think more and more, like just this weather, the way this weather is right now, the contrast between being inside. It's December here and it's cold. So when we go outside, when we go outside for like walking meditation, you really feel embraced by the weather itself. That cold hits you. It hits you. It does. It hits you. And Zen Master Dogen talks about awakening being triggered by a needle, a mallet, a fist, a shout. These are all human. A fist is a human thing. A needle, man-made or human-made. All of these things. But the weather itself can wake us up too, literally, but also from a Zen perspective, we can get woken up. And I don't know if any of you noticed this morning, you could see it was very bright. It looked like, I don't know if it was, I'm guessing there was a planet in the sky up there. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about this morning.
Yeah, it was bright. There was other stars around it, but this one was really bright. It was magnificent. And that's where the universe can wake us up. We don't have to depend on some person, but we notice something. We realize we wake up to the existence of something beyond ourselves. Maybe that's one way to put this. Fayan says, how could there be any sectarian styles to value? And this is pointing to different lineages. there's this age-old thing about which lineage do you belong to. Actually, it's not so age-old. It's happening a lot. I see it a lot in the United States. Like you have to say when you're talking with other Zen people, oh, what's your lineage? And people have a tremendous amount of pride put into what their lineage is. And if you know their lineage, it's like, oh, okay, they're set. If they're part of that lineage, then they're good to go. This lineage we don't know so much about. I don't know, a little shaky. So anyway, but we put lots of we place a lot of value on that. But he says, how could there be any sectarian styles to value? And I think about this place here, Zen Center of Pittsburgh, right? This is the Zen Center of Pittsburgh. It was formerly the temple of Kyoki Roberts, student of Nonin, student of Katagiri Roshi. Katagiri Roshi, that's the lineage. That's like a huge name, especially out in the Midwest. There's Katagiri Roshi. And I deeply respect Katagiri Roshi and Nonin and Kyoki. And now, look, it changed hands, and it didn't necessarily go to somebody within that same lineage. And that's common. That's a common thing to happen. So now you have Kotoku, who's a student of Akiba, Genko Roshi, and there's that lineage. These all go back to Dogen. But even to say the lineage is Soto Zen, it's just another one of these valuing valuing different sects. In Japan, Zuyoji is presently a Soto Zen monastery, but in years past, apparently it was a Rinzai Zen monastery, and so even across sects, there's a teacher in California, Grace Shearson. Maybe some of you have heard of her, and she couldn't find somebody to take over her temple that was either a student or a Zen student. And she passed it on to a Tibetan. A Tibetan group now has her place. So there's a lot of possibility here. The Des Moines Zen Center moved into a church. It was a church in the middle of a neighborhood, and now it's a Zen Center. So even across religions, we don't have to get so stuck in, it's got to be this lineage. It's got to be this student. It's got to be my successor kind of thing. So there's 4 points here I want to make. One is that enlightenment is not something that that can be passed on. Teachers can help to wake us up to what we know already, or maybe something that's hidden within us. It's always, so the deepest, where we find enlightenment is within ourselves. And so when we're sitting here, this sesshin, that's what we're manifesting every moment. Every moment has that potential, at least. Every moment has that potential. So the second thing is that when we acknowledge a teacher or a lineage, it's not, the point is not to authenticate yourself, but to show some sense of humbleness towards that particular lineage. There's some degree of humility. And the stories in the so the third point is these stories in the Denkoroku, the transmission of light. They go from Buddha all the way to Bodhidharma in India, and then from Taiso Eka in China, all the way to Dogen in Japan, and then from Dogen to Keizan, and then it kind of trails off. And then Keizan had so many myriads of disciples that Soto Zen really kind of became much huger. But this is kind of the foundational text of all of those different lineages. But it's not to the purpose of these stories is not to enhance the prestige of a person's lineage. It's not like not like something that we're proud of. Like I'm proud of this lineage. I think that we have to. No, there's something about that. I find there can sometimes be pride in saying I'm part of this lineage. It's not a bad thing, I suppose, to have some pride, but this doesn't prove a person's authority. It doesn't prove that you have something. I learned recently that Tendo Nyojo, he's the Chinese master that passed on the Dharma to Dogen, and it said that he never even revealed his lineage until he died. Nobody knew his lineage until he died. And he was a Soto Zen master and responsible for several monasteries in China. People recognized his authority not based on his lineage papers, but by the way that he was. They could see it in him. They could see something they saw. And you can see that, and we see that. We have the capacity to see teachers with our own eyes. We recognize there's something in that person. I see it. I certainly saw it in my own teachers. Like, wow, that person has something. I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, I need to get a little bit closer to it. I want to know what that is. And I think it's sometimes maybe more clear when it's somebody who's from another culture than yours. You can see that something sometimes. In the Japanese Zen teachers, sometimes you're just like, wow, they have this presence about them that is just blows you away. I know I felt that from multiple Japanese teachers. One just sitting in Zazen, and it's just like you could feel their practice from a distance. That's something. That and you're not going to go to that person and say, okay, let me see your papers and make sure this is the right one. So Tendo Nyojo, nobody even knew what his lineage was. Even Taoists, it said, recognized that he was a master teacher. So the purpose of these stories in the Denkoroku is to evoke a sense of humility in the reader. If there's any purpose, it's to evoke a sense of humility. And if you read it from that perspective, you put those lenses on of the sense of humility, it changes what you see. I mean, if you just look at the first story, but every story in here, you're like, oh my goodness, I cannot do what those people did. Taiso Eka cut his arm off. And you're like, am I supposed to do that too? I'm not going to do that. No. You don't. No. What that is? What we're supposed to be doing when we're reading that, if we're supposed to do something, what that can do for us is like, wow, somebody sacrificed themselves like that. It's a demonstration of sacrifice, but also like that's it. It can have the effect of evoking a sense of profound humility. Nobody asked Taiso Eka to cut his arm off. Bodhidharma certainly didn't ask him to do that. Say, if you want to practice with me, you got to do that. Taiso Eka did it by his own choice. But look at what it says about the Buddha. He spent 6 years practicing ascetic exercises. Remember? Subsequently, he sat on an indestructible seat, so immobile that there were cobwebs in his brows. Whether these stories, you can ask whether, is that really true? Come on. That's not the point, though. The point is to evoke this sense of, no way, I can't, that's impossible for me to do. I could never do that. And to kind of bring ourselves back down to reality. Like, this is what these people did. Bodhidharma sat facing a wall for 9 years. It said his arms and legs dropped off. And that's why you have these Bodhidharma dolls in Japan with no arms and no legs. It's just a body. It's kind of like an egg-shaped body with two big round eyes and a mean face, and every time you push the doll down, it pops back up. Because it says that Bodhidharma said, "Fall down 7 times, get up 8," and you just keep at what you keep at your practice. Keep at it. Don't be discouraged. I mean, if you get discouraged, that's okay, but just get back up. It's okay to get discouraged. Just get back up. So the point here is not to imitate these various teachers, but to feel a sense of, I like this word, vulnerability. To feel a sense of vulnerability. What does that word mean? I think it's actually better than the word humility. Humility is, it's almost self-deprecating. But vulnerability, we have this sense of kind of being naked and exposed, and that there's nothing that we can do about it. But and if we can move in the direction of being of that sense of vulnerability within ourselves, that's where our practice becomes really alive. We can go from a piece of dead wood to fiery life. Like, wow. And at the same time, it's kind of like that's, to me, that's entering the dragon's gate. You get chomped up by the teeth of the dragon, like a fish. The fish swims into the dragon's gate, gets chomped up, and comes out a dragon. But we have to go through that. We have to go through that maybe multiple times. It's not just like a one-time thing. So it's interesting that most of us here today most of us here are men. So I wanted to share something I heard on a program called Seen on Radio. Has anybody heard of that program, Seen on Radio? They've been putting out a really good stuff on racism. There's a program recently called Seeing White. It's a podcast, Seen on Radio. John Biewen is the he's the host of the show. And he went around and did a lot of research on racism and whiteness, and he has these conversations with a lot of different people, and it's a series that went on for some time. And it was so popular that they decided to follow it up with another one on basically on patriarchy, on the idea of women being kind of sidelined in our society, and men taking kind of center stage. And I was listening to a couple of the podcasts on the way here, and I thought, wow, this is just right on for what I think the transmission of light is getting at. But keep in mind, too, Zen and Buddhism has been historically very patriarchal. It's a patriarchal religion in many ways. I mean, not in many ways. You have, in Japan, mostly male teachers. In the United States, it's changed a lot because you have almost 50-50 men and women teaching. And the practice has, I think, in a lot of ways opened up to women in a way that it's, wow, there can be female teachers. I mean, here I am, I'm a male, and I was trained under a female teacher. So that's a real shift. One of the Japanese nuns that practiced with us, she said, that would never happen in Japan. You wouldn't find a male monk training under a female teacher. They just don't do that. In fact, in the time of the Buddha, the Buddha was very reluctant to ordain any females. It said that Ananda had to request this on behalf of the Buddha's aunt, Mahapajapati. Mahapajapati was the aunt that raised him up, because remember, his mother died when he was only a week or 10 days old. The Buddha's mother died. So his aunt, Mahapajapati, brought him up. And here, the successor to the kingdom, talk about successor. The Buddha disregarded successorship. He was supposed to be a king, and he tossed that aside. He disregarded that. He disregarded caste, even allowing people from the untouchable caste to come into his sangha, which would never happen. He was in the warrior caste, and warriors are not the same as Brahmins. Brahmins are the ones that are holders of the sacred Vedas. The Buddha crossed a lot of boundaries. Anyways, Mahapajapati asked Ananda, tell the Buddha, I want to be, we have a whole retinue that wants to be disciples, want to be nuns. Tell him, request it on our behalf. And Ananda said that went to the Buddha and had to ask 3 times, and finally on the 3rd time the Buddha said, well, okay, but the nuns will have to have many more precepts to follow, 360 some, and the monks have 250 some, and no matter what, the nun that has the most seniority is less senior to a monk that was just ordained yesterday. So a nun that had been ordained, say, 20, 30 years is on a lower rank than a monk that had just been ordained a day ago. Those were the provisions that they could ordain. So it tells you, even though the Buddha was enlightened in terms of breaking through caste system, in terms of gender, it's a different story. But look what's happened in Japan. And my teacher was asked to be the bishop of North America. She turned it down, but she was asked by the Sotoshu to be the head of North America. This was about 7, 8 years ago. So that's a real shift, that Japanese would actually ask a female teacher to take that role on. And actually right now, Galen Godwin has stepped into, I guess it's a similar position that they're creating. So they've asked another female to do that. So it's starting to shift in our culture in certain ways, but certainly not in many ways. But if we want to get a sense of especially for men, what mainstream culture says that we need to do, the message to men. I have 7 of them that I came up with based on this particular podcast. One is that you need to speak authoritatively, like you know the truth. You need to speak if you're a man in this culture, you're expected to do that. If you can't speak authoritatively and act as though you know the truth. That's number 1. Number 2, you need to be extraordinarily competitive. Extraordinarily competitive. There's no room for cooperation. So totally cutthroat. Number 3, you need to go for the win at all costs. Life is like a contest. You've got to get the win. You're either a winner or a loser. There's no in between there. These are, as I'm saying these things, you might feel like, oh, yeah, right? Or you might think, yeah, of course. Or you might be starting to think, oh, is that the kind of stuff that I've been thinking? I know for me personally that I identify with this idea of always having to win. Being a competitive swimmer. That was just, my sister and I, we started swimming when we were really young. I was 7 and she was 6. and she was faster than me when we were little kids. And I was so jealous. I thought, oh, I hate this sport. My little sister's beating me. And so these messages, it's not the message, this isn't a message that we get once we get older. This is a message that it's like the air that we breathe, and our children soak it up at a very young age. They don't even know it. It's not like it's taught. And I became really cutthroat. Like there's no sense in doing this if I can't win. And I find myself, now that I'm swimming for recreation, I continually have to undo this competitive spirit that I have. Not completely, because there's some benefits to being competitive. I mean, it can get you motivated, it can get your energy up. So I don't want to say that what I'm saying right now is not good at all. It's good to be able to speak authoritatively sometimes, but to think that you always know the right answers, that's a kind of a hell realm to have to be placed in. I know my father, bless him, he always felt like, even today, he always feels like he has to respond with the right answer. And I mean, maybe not always, but an I don't know rarely came from his mouth. I don't know. You know what? I don't know. Maybe you got to figure that out. Oftentimes what he would do is figure it out for me. Oh, okay, let me do. Taking control. So here's another question that men often have to ask. Where are you in the pecking order? Where are you? Number 5, you need to be seen as a success. You need to achieve, excel, get outside recognition. There's need for outside recognition. This totally flies in the face of what we're talking about here with the transmission of light. There is no outside recognition that, oh, okay, you've got it. We can wake each other up, but it's not like somebody has more than you. We don't sit because one person. I love Fujita Isho. The way he talks about Zazen, he says that the experience of Zazen is the same if you've been sitting for 30 years or the first day. No, it doesn't. We're just sitting. We're just sitting, really. There's other forms of meditation where you progress, you make progression along a particular track. And even within certain schools of Zen, in the Rinzai Zen, you're progressing through koans. That's a legitimate way. I don't want to put these ways down. But we're doing something quite unique here, I think, too, that sometimes we miss it because we're looking for some kind of advancement, progression, or verification that what we've done is legitimate or on track. But the power of this practice is to just return to our beginner's mind again and again. Like, oh, I'm starting all over from zero, from scratch. I don't know anything. Boom, I don't know anything. Right, just start there. So number 6 is you need to show that you're invulnerable. You think about our superheroes. I love Marvel comics. Don't you? I love Superman. I've been catching myself watching The Flash. These like impenetrable human beings. Sometimes, mostly men, but sometimes women are in there too. There's Supergirl. Just like unbeatable. Maybe they get dragged down sometime, but they always come out. They always come out ahead. And so we have that in ourselves. If we're really honest, we got to say, there's a part of us, there's a part of me that wishes to be invulnerable. It's like Superman. Bullets won't harm you. So again, it's not that it's bad to be competitive, but we live in a culture that's excessively competitive, and one person says that American culture practically sanctifies competitiveness, whereas it has also been recognized across culture that that excessive competitiveness is actually a character flaw. Think about it in that way. That if you're excessively competitive, that's a flaw in your character. Just think about how we talk about or feel about people who are winners. That person who scored the touchdown, or shot the winning shot on the basketball court, or hit the home run. Those are the winners, and we like boost them up. We put them up on a pedestal really high. So they interviewed a man named Terry Real on this Scene on Radio episode on men. And I just want to quote from him because I felt like it was so powerful. I wanted to share it. He says, "The lie of patriarchy is dominion. You are not in charge of the universe. You are not in control of the universe. All men have underlying shame because we all live a lie." Just take that in for a second. All men have underlying, whether you believe it or not, just take it in. Consider it. You don't have to believe it, but just consider it. If it is true, you can ask yourself that question. Oh, is there shame? If I don't feel like I'm on top, if I'm in control, do I feel shame there? Okay, continue with this quote. "The lie is we are invulnerable when in fact we are not. The lie is we are in charge of nature. We are in charge of result, whether we close the deal or not." Now, don't you feel? When I think about myself, that's definitely there. I definitely feel a kind of like I'm responsible for the results of things. I'm responsible for how everybody feels. I feel that when I'm trying to take care of my son and he's crying, I think, oh, it's my fault that he's like that. It doesn't mean I don't do what I can do to help him out, but I'm not totally in charge of what's going on there. And I see it like, it's so embarrassing to me when my wife steps in and takes over. I thought I could do it. Can't you just let me do it? I was doing it. I was going to do it. We were getting there. And I find it personally very embarrassing. I'm just admitting that. It's not something I'm proud of. I feel like, I feel a sense of embarrassment because I can't control what he's doing right now. And that's my practice. That's what I have to work on. It's like a mirror. And I think that we all have, whether you have children or not, it doesn't matter. We all have situations where our sense of control or our lack of control is revealed. It's just like this layer is peeled off, and there it is, lack of control, looking at you right in the face. You are not, and how does that feel? So I continue with this quote. He says, "We are not in charge of shit. We are in charge of ourselves on a good day. Running away from your vulnerability is like running away from your rectum." When you shift from that dominant hierarchical thinking to relational thinking, you shift from linear thinking to ecological thinking. You are not above the system. You are a humble subcomponent of the system. You live inside of it, and it is in your interest to keep it clean and healthy. So we can think of this in terms of small systems like a family unit or a community, but even in larger systems like the ecosystem. He continues, "The delusion of dominance over Mother Nature will kill us. Let me be clear about the stakes. If we continue to believe that we are technologists above the rule of nature, nature will prove otherwise." As much as the the tradition that we've inherited is patriarchal in many ways. There's also this sense of relationalness here, and we find it right in the first story of the Buddha. This idea that all things are connected. Listen to this part about the Buddha's enlightenment. Even though what the Buddha pointed out and explained in the more than 360 meetings over 49 years was not the same, the various stories, parables, metaphors, and explanations did not go beyond the principle illustrated in the story of his enlightenment. So he taught on multiple occasions over his 49-year career. He taught many different things, but the core of what he taught was not different from what we're hearing about his particular enlightenment experience. And here it is. That is to say, I, quote unquote, I is not Shakyamuni Buddha. I is not Shakyamuni Buddha. Even Shakyamuni Buddha comes from this I. And it does not only give birth to Shakyamuni Buddha, all beings on earth also come from here. You can put your name, insert your name where it says Shakyamuni Buddha. That is to say, I is not, put in your name. Even your name comes from this I. And it does not only give birth to you, all beings on earth also come from here, from this place, from you. Just as, here's it, just as when you lift up a net, all the holes are raised. No, simultaneously. Pick up one end of a net and all the holes are raised simultaneously in that net. In the same way, when Shakyamuni Buddha was enlightened, so too were all beings on earth enlightened. And it was not only all beings on earth that were enlightened. All the Buddhas of past, present, and future also attained enlightenment. So we're not just talking about a particular time and a particular place, but something that happened beyond time, that is actually happening in the present moment. The Buddha's enlightenment wasn't something that happened just 2,500 years ago, but it's something that we can experience right now. And that's what we're doing in the sesshin. We're sitting, it's a reenactment of the enlightenment of the Buddha. That's what Soto Zen Zazen is. It's a reenactment. Now, I want to be really clear about it. It's a reenactment of the Buddha's enlightenment. That's what we're doing. It's a kind of a celebration, actually. It might not seem like it. We don't have any bells going off and playing guitar. We could do that too. We could sing, and we do. We chant, but we're sitting with. I don't want to say sitting with the Buddha. Well, maybe. While this is so, do not think of Shakyamuni Buddha as having become enlightened. Do not see Shakyamuni Buddha outside of all beings on earth. That means when we go outside and we're doing walking meditation, we see those grasses, see the dead leaves on the ground, we see the trees, the green, the snow, the whiteness of the snow. All of those are included in this statement. However immensely diverse the mountains, rivers, land, and all forms and appearances may be, all of them are in the eye of the Buddha. All of them are in the eye of the Buddha. It's like the universe is full of eyes looking, E-Y-E, that is, these eyes. And you too are standing in the eye of the Buddha. You too are standing in the eye of the Buddha. And it is not simply that you are standing there. The I has become you. That Buddha's eye has become you. Buddha's eye has become everyone's whole body, each standing tall. Therefore, this clear, bright eye that spans all time should not be thought of as the people evidently here. You are Buddha's eye. Buddha is your whole body. And it goes back to that idea that this is not like an intellectual project that we're doing, but it's really recognizing within our own body, our own Buddha nature, our own Buddha wisdom in our body. All right, I think that will conclude us for today. Thank you very much for your attention.
May this merit extend
Universally to all, so that we, together with all beings, realize the Buddha way. Beings are numberless, I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. The way is unsurpassable, I vow to realize it.